Hey everybody, welcome to another Picture Perfect review. I'm Dom and today I'm going to be reviewing The Wilderness Night. This is going to be a fairly spoiler-free review, but I am going to get into a lot of parts throughout the first couple acts of the movie, so minor spoiler warning. The Wilderness Night is a movie starring Jordan Warner, Michael O'Hare, and John Summers, and it was directed by Jordan Warner. Now Jordan's a pretty good friend of mine. I worked with him for a couple years and I've known about him in the local film industry for a while here in Buffalo. Actually, I knew about this movie even before I met him, so it was interesting to see it go through the post-production process. There's a lot going on in The Wilderness Night, but the main plot of the movie involves a man, played by Jordan, dealing with some psychological demons after the death of his wife. There's some cult involvement, there's a little bit of an apocalyptic theme going on, and there's some other plot strings thrown in as well with a lot of the other characters. So first things first, I want to get to what I really liked about this movie. I think at the top of it is probably the sound design and the score. The score is done by Philippe Oleika, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and it really does a good job of telling the story on its own. If you close your eyes and just listen to the music, you could tell pretty much what's going on throughout the entire movie. From the very start of the movie, you can kind of get a sense of how grand this is going to be, and I think the set design helped a lot with that. It's very transformative and it's very immersive, and even as someone from Buffalo, where it was filmed, I didn't get that sense of, oh, I know where that place is. So Jordan does a very good job with all of that. He also does a really good job with the actors, including the extras. Every single character in this movie does a really good job of putting themselves into their role. A lot of these characters have deep backstories. Sometimes they're a little convoluted, sometimes they're a little redundant, but the actors do a really good job of communicating their lines to the audience. To me, the standout performances were John Summers, who plays Edwin, and the late great Michael O'Hare, who plays the cult leader. He does a really good job of driving this movie. He is the anchor of this movie. Every scene that he's in, you are attached to the screen. I never got a chance to work with Michael myself, but seeing what Jordan was able to do with his talents is a reward all on its own. Before I go any further, I do want to say that this is a very dark movie. These are heavy themes dealing with suicide, judgment, not really for children or the faint of heart, so I wanted to preface this next part. In this movie, there's a lot of visions of hell and demons, and they're really well done. Sometimes they sort of fall short, but I think the editing and the sound effects make up for all of that. It really doesn't ever take you out of the movie. You're never thinking, oh, this is sort of a low budget movie. I never really got that feeling watching this. Now, as far as the production goes, I know it took place over the course of a couple years. I know there were a lot of rewrites, a lot of reshoots, and you can kind of tell with the writing. It's very up and down. There were a lot of standout lines that maybe say, whoa, that's a really good line. And then every so often you get one where it's like, maybe that one could have been a little more well thought out. For example, as I mentioned, this deals with a lot of judgment, a lot of sin, things of that nature. So there's lines like, pain changes a man's heart. It can either help him or destroy him. That's the main theme of the movie, and it does a really good job of pushing that forward. And then there's other scenes, and this one makes me laugh because Jordan and I both worked in news, and looking back on it, I think he probably realizes this isn't really something they say. There's a scene where a journalist comes on screen and says, now for the news. Does it ruin the movie? Absolutely not. I thought it was just funny. Maybe it could have used a small rewrite, but things like that. There's another scene where a woman's horse gets stolen, and she just kind of looks around and is like, where's my horse? Now, I don't have a horse, but if I had a horse and it went missing, I'd probably be a little more panicked. But shout out to Jordan for using a horse in his movie in the first place. Aside from a few lines like that, the movie really does benefit from its themes and its discussions that it provokes. Discussions like death, sin, violence, judgment. There's things like that in almost every single scene, and there's not a whole lot of relief from it. So again, if you're not used to that kind of stuff, if you don't like thinking about that, talking about that, this might not be the movie for you. But aside from that, the movie tends to be a little broken up. There's a lot of struggle between the transitions, especially from the first act to the second act and the second act to the third act. They're very jarring, they're very noticeable, and there's a huge shift in not only scenery, but sort of the tone of the movie. It's almost tough to root for any one character, even the protagonist, because it does jump from one scene to the next so quickly. There's a lot of world building in this movie, but at times it tends to be confusing because you jump from Jordan's character to John's character to later on you get to the cult characters. You never really feel like you understand the motivations. You see the motivations, but it's tough to understand at times. I think if the story was narrowed down to a sort of smaller setting rather than this very large apocalyptic world, there's a lot of corruption going on. It tries to deal with too much at once, I think. Now getting to the third act, I won't spoil anything, but it is very disturbing. The climax is very, very violent. It's heavy. And again, at times it's almost difficult to understand. There's a few twists, there's a few turns, and I'm not sure I understood it all on the first watch. With that being said, I think this movie deserves a second watch. After you see everything that goes on and you're able to pull these storylines together, it starts feeling like you're putting a puzzle together. You're putting these pieces together and seeing where they play off of each other. But again, I think on a first watch, you don't get that experience. This isn't bad for a local, lower budget movie. Jordan tells the story he wants to tell. He builds it up and he breaks the characters down. And like I said, it's immersive and it's very difficult at times. I enjoy watching movies that have these sort of theological ideas and consequences. So for that, I'm going to give it a 7.1 out of 10. Now I know what you guys are probably going to say. Well, I just gave Black Widow a 6.1. You're telling me this movie is better than a Marvel movie? Well, in some ways I think it is. One is a very fun and entertaining watch. The other is very thought-provoking and dark and at times even painful to watch. So they're two very different movies. It's tough to rate them on a single scale, but 7.1, that's what I'm going with. Guys, once again, thanks for watching. My art is in the background. It's available for sale. I'll put a link to it in the description. If you like my reviews and want to see me rant about movies even more, I've got a few more in the works. Let me know what you want to see reviewed and I'll try and get to it. Thanks for watching, everyone.